Alistair Voss stood at the window of his home office, watching the sunset cast golden light across the sprawling estate he'd built from nothing. At 42, he had the kind of success most men only dreamed of. Voss Security had revolutionized home protection across 3 regions, making him wealthier than his humble beginnings in rural Greenfield would have predicted. He checked his watch, a Patek Philippe his grandfather had given him before passing, and realized he needed to start getting ready. Tonight was his 10th anniversary with Samantha, 10 years of building a life together, of planning and dreaming, of sacrifice. "You need anything else before I head out, Mr. Voss?" asked Nelson, his assistant of 7 years. Alistair turned, offering a rare smile. "No, I'm good. You should get home to Linda and the kids. Big night tonight. 10 years is something to celebrate." Nelson nodded, gathering his tablet and notes. "Ms. Voss has been working on something special, I hear." "Has she?" "She's been secretive lately," Alistair said, loosening his tie. "She insisted on planning everything this year. Usually, I'm the one who handles anniversaries." Nelson smiled. "Well, enjoy. See you Monday." After Nelson left, Alistair opened his desk drawer and removed a small velvet box. Inside was a custom-designed diamond necklace with a pendant shaped like the North Star, a reminder of their first date, when they'd lain on a blanket watching the sky after a concert. Samantha had pointed to the North Star, saying it reminded her of Alistair, her constant in a chaotic world. As he showered and dressed, memories surfaced. Meeting Samantha at a charity gala 12 years ago, her laugh that cut through the pretentious atmosphere, the way she challenged his cynical worldview. Back then, he'd been ruthless in business, but still believed in second chances. Samantha had been different from the socialites who usually orbited him. She taught art at an inner-city school, passionate about giving underprivileged kids creative outlets. Alistair had grown up poor in a steel town, where his father worked 60-hour weeks until a workplace accident left him disabled. His mother cleaned houses to make ends meet. He clawed his way through college on scholarships and part-time jobs, then built his security business from a small storefront into a regional powerhouse. He understood the value of every dollar earned and despised waste, betrayal, and disloyalty above all else. The doorbell rang as Alistair adjusted his cufflinks. It was Samantha's cousin, Ruby, arriving to house sit. "Hey, Alistair. Samantha asked me to watch the place tonight. Said you guys might be staying in the city after dinner." Alistair frowned slightly. "Did she? News to me." Ruby's smile faltered. "Oh, maybe it's a surprise." "Probably," Alistair said, though something cold settled in his stomach. "She already left," Ruby continued. "Said she needed to check on some details at the restaurant." "That sounds like her. Always the perfectionist," Alistair said, watching Ruby settle onto the couch. On the drive to Valentia, the 5-star restaurant where they'd had their first official date, Alistair replayed recent months in his mind. Samantha had seemed distant, spending more evenings at art department functions and gallery openings. Their conversations had grown perfunctory. The last time they'd been intimate was nearly 2 months ago, and it felt mechanical. He'd assumed it was due to her recent promotion to department head at Ridgeview Academy, the prestigious private school where she now taught. The job came with more responsibility, more events. Alistair had tried to be supportive, knowing how much her career meant to her. He arrived at Valentia 15 minutes early. The maitre d' informed him that Ms. Voss was already there, speaking with the manager. Alistair nodded, about to follow, when he heard Samantha's voice from around the corner. "My husband thinks this is an anniversary dinner," she was saying, her voice low but clear. "It's actually where I'll tell him I want a divorce." Alistair froze, blood turning to ice in his veins. "Of course, Ms. Voss," the manager replied. "We've arranged the private dining room as requested. The cake has been delivered as well." "Perfect," Samantha said. "Once this is over, I can finally start my new life." Alistair stepped back into the shadows as Samantha and the manager walked past. Through the doorway to the private room, He glimpsed a cake on the table. Instead of happy anniversary, it read goodbye forever in elegant script. His hand closed around the velvet box in his pocket, knuckles white. Alistair's mind raced as he slipped into the restroom to collect himself. 10 years of marriage, ending not with a conversation, but a public ambush. He splashed cold water on his face, staring at his reflection. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory. A boss doesn't show weakness. When someone tries to cut you down, you make sure they never get another chance. He straightened his tie and made a decision. Alistair Voss wouldn't be blindsided. He wouldn't be made a fool. Taking a deep breath, he walked to the private dining room. Samantha looked up, her practiced smile faltering when she saw his expression. "Alistair, you're early," she said, standing to kiss his cheek. She wore a new dress he'd never seen, her honey blonde hair styled elegantly. "I wanted everything to be perfect when you arrived." Alistair gestured to the cake. Interesting choice of dessert. Color drained from Samantha's face. That wasn't supposed to be brought out yet. Clearly. He pulled out his chair and sat. "Why don't we skip the charade and get to the part where you tell me you want a divorce?" Samantha's carefully constructed facade crumbled. She sank back into her seat. "How did you? Does it matter?" Alistair interrupted. "What matters is that after 10 years, you plan to ambush me in public rather than having the decency to discuss this privately. I didn't think you'd listen if I tried to talk about it at home," she said, voice small. So public humiliation seemed like the better option. He maintained perfect control, voice never rising. "Who is he?" Samantha's eyes widened. "What? Please, I wasn't born yesterday. The late nights, the new clothes, the sudden work events. Who is he?" She twisted her wedding ring. "Leander Morrow. He's the new head of visual arts at Ridgeview's collegiate division." "And how long?" 7 months, she whispered. 7 months, Alistair repeated. Nearly a third of a year living a lie, sleeping beside him while planning her escape. He felt something fundamental shift inside him. The last remnant of the man who believed in second chances withering. "Does he make you happy?" he asked, surprising even himself. Samantha looked up, tears streaking her makeup. "Yes, he understands me in ways you never try to." Alistair nodded once, processing. "I see. Alistair, we've been growing apart for years. You're always working, always focused on the business. When was the last time you asked about my art? My passions? Leander sees me, really sees me. And what does he bring to the table besides validation?" Alistair asked, his tone clinical. "Financially. Not everything is about money, Alistair. That's always been your problem." Alistair laughed coldly. "Says the woman who's enjoyed the fruits of my labor for a decade. The house, the cars, the vacations, your studio with top-of-the-line equipment. I never asked for those things." "No, but you never refused them." Alistair leaned forward. "Tell me, does Leander know you're planning to divorce me tonight? Is he waiting somewhere to celebrate afterward?" Samantha's silence was answer enough. "I thought so." Alistair stood, buttoning his jacket. "You'll be hearing from my attorney. Until then, I suggest you find somewhere else to stay." Samantha grabbed his arm. "Alistair, wait. We need to discuss." "There's nothing to discuss. You made your choice 7 months ago." He removed her hand. "Enjoy your cake." As Alistair turned to leave, Samantha called after him. "What happened to you?" "The Alistair I married would never be this cold." He paused at the doorway. "He died tonight. You killed him." Outside, in the cool evening air, Alistair called his driver, then scrolled to a name he hadn't dialed in years. Jonas Pike, an old acquaintance with unique information-gathering skills. Alistair had helped him avoid charges years ago in exchange for occasional services. Tonight, he would call in that debt. As his car arrived, Alistair looked back at the restaurant one last time. A waiter was escorting Samantha out a side entrance, where a red Alfa Romeo waited. A man with artfully disheveled dark hair. "Leander, presumably, embraced her. Alistair watched them drive away, his expression unreadable. "Where to, sir?" the driver asked. "The Northgate Hotel downtown," Alistair replied. "Then I need you to make a stop at our office. I'll be working late." As the city lights blurred past, Alistair removed the velvet box from his pocket and opened it one last time. The diamond North Star glittered under the car's interior light. Deliberately, he closed the box and dropped it into a trash can as they paused at a red light. The North Star had fallen. Now there was only darkness ahead, and in that darkness, Alistair would become something new, something merciless. He set up in the Northgate Hotel suite, transforming it into his command center for what he now called Operation Severance. 3 days after the restaurant incident, Jonas Pike sat across from him, sliding a thick folder over the glass coffee table. "Everything you asked for," Jonas said. "Phone records, credit card statements, emails, social media. Leander Morose isn't as careful as he thinks." Alistair skimmed the contents. "And the background. That's where it gets interesting." Jonas leaned forward. "Morose isn't just an artist and teacher. He's got a pattern. 3 different schools in 7 years, always leaving after getting involved with wealthy married women." Alistair's eyes narrowed. "A predator with a type." "Exactly. And here's the best part. He doesn't just leave behind a broken heart. The last 2 women divorced their husbands, got huge settlements, and then, surprise, Leander vanished with a big chunk of their money within a year. So Samantha isn't special. She's just his next target," Alistair said, feeling no satisfaction, only cold determination. "There's more. He's got gambling debts, big ones, owes nearly 200 grand to some very unpleasant people." Alistair studied a surveillance photo of Leander and Samantha entering a boutique hotel, his arm around her waist. "How much does Samantha know?" "From what I can tell, nothing. He's played the starving artist role perfectly with her. Claims he stays in a small apartment because he values experiences over possessions. In reality, he can't afford better because of his debts." Alistair turned to the window, overlooking the city. "What about her family and friends?" "Parents still in Midford, a sister in Lakeshire, and the cousin you mentioned, Ruby, who was house-sitting. She's been distancing herself from your mutual social circle for months. Typical affair behavior." "And legally?" "It's a gray area," Jonas admitted. "Nothing overtly illegal if we're careful, but definitely not something you'd want scrutinized." Alistair turned, expression resolute. "I want to be crystal clear, Jonas. I'm not looking to reconcile. I'm not looking for justice. I want them both ruined. Financially, socially, emotionally." Jonas studied him. "That's extreme, even for you, Alistair." "Is it?" Alistair asked quietly. "She planned to humiliate me on our 10th anniversary. Now I find out she's fallen for a con man who would bleed her dry after taking whatever he could from our settlement. They deserve each other, and they deserve what's coming." Jonas sighed. The Alistair I knew had lines he wouldn't cross. "The Alistair you knew died at Valentia 3 nights ago." Alistair opened his laptop. "I need 3 things. First, documentation of all Morro's debts and previous relationships. Second, I need to speak with his former conquests, any who might be willing to help. Third, I need access to Ridgeview Academy systems, donor lists, staff communications, everything." "Planning to get him fired?" Jonas asked. "That's just the appetizer," Alistair said with a smile that never reached his eyes. "I'm planning a 3-course meal. Over the next week, Alistair barely slept. His company ran on autopilot while he orchestrated revenge. He called in favors, liquidated investments, and assembled a team of specialists, all operating with the precision that had made Voss Security an industry leader. Meanwhile, Samantha moved in with Leander, trading a 6,000-square-foot home for a 900-square-foot apartment. Alistair's attorney froze their joint accounts, leaving Samantha with only her teacher's salary. According to Jonas's surveillance, The honeymoon phase was already showing cracks. On day 9, Alistair received a call from Teresa Bowden, Leander's previous conquest from Stoneport. After verifying her identity, Alistair explained part of his situation. "So you're husband number 3, Teresa said, bitterness clear in her voice. "He's nothing if not consistent. I'd like to meet. What I'm planning could benefit us both. I lost everything because of him," Teresa replied. "My marriage, my reputation, most of my money. What could you possibly offer me?" "The one thing you haven't had yet," Alistair said. "Revenge." There was a pause. "I'm listening." "I'll send a private jet. Be ready tomorrow." As he ended the call, his phone lit up with Samantha's number. Her 5th attempt since that night. This time, instead of ignoring it, he answered. "Alistair, finally, we need to talk about what you've done. The divorce, the division of assets, or the fact my new partner is supposedly a serial con artist." He heard her swallow hard. "That's not true, isn't it?" Alistair said calmly. "Ask him about Teresa Bowden in Stoneport or Adriana Kelly in Old Ridge. Both divorced their husbands for him. Both were left financially ruined within a year. You're just trying to hurt me." "No, Samantha, I'm trying to warn you. But you won't listen because you never do. So instead, I'll simply say this: you made your choice, and now you'll live with the consequences." He ended the call. Nelson appeared in the doorway of the suite. "Sir, the board is asking questions. They need you at tomorrow's quarterly meeting." "I'll be there," Alistair said. "And Nelson, clear my schedule for the following week. We're about to launch a new project. What should I tell them it's called?" Alistair looked at the surveillance photos spread across the table. Samantha and Leander, blissfully unaware of the storm. "Call it Project Severance." 2 weeks after the anniversary debacle, Alistair sat at the head of an elegant conference table in his downtown office. Around him were key players: Jonas Pike for intelligence, Teresa Bowden representing Leander's past victims, Declan Ames, his ruthless attorney, managing legal strategy, and newly recruited Viola Crane, Ridgeview Academy's assistant financial director, passed over for promotion in favor of one of Leander's friends. "Let's review," Alistair said, adjusting his cufflinks. "Leander Moreau has over 200,000 in gambling debts. He's pulled this con at least twice before. Teresa. He researches targets, discovers their emotional vulnerabilities, then positions himself as the perfect solution." Teresa said coldly. "He told me he was secretly wealthy, but chose teaching to give back. In reality, he needed my divorce settlement to pay off debts. Once he drained my accounts, he disappeared overnight." Alistair turned to Viola. "And at Ridgeview, his personnel file shows he lied about his exhibition history," Viola said, pushing up her glasses. 3 galleries he claimed had his work don't exist. He was hired mostly because of Headmaster Walton's friendship with him. They were college roommates. "Perfect," Alistair said. "Jonas, how about the other leads?" Jonas cleared his throat. "We located Adriana Kelly, his Chicago target. She's remarried and reluctant, but she agreed to provide documentation of his manipulation. Also, we've arranged to purchase Leander's gambling debts. Once the paperwork clears," Declan said, tapping his tablet, "we'll effectively own his debt and can call it due at any time." "Excellent," Alistair said. "Now phase 2. Viola, what have you found about Ridgeview's finances?" Viola handed over a folder. "The art department under Morogues has irregular accounting. Supply orders and delivered items don't match. My guess is he's skimming, having the school pay for materials that never arrive." "Good. Document everything, but take no action yet." Alistair looked at Teresa. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" The elegant woman nodded. "I've prepared a detailed letter to the Ridgeview Board of Trustees about my experience with Leander, with proof of his manipulation. Adriana has done the same. Meanwhile," Alistair added, I've prepared cease and desist notices regarding the unauthorized use of my security system designs. We discovered Leander photographed my designs and tried to peddle them as artistic concepts. One question, Jonas said. What about Samantha? Is she collateral damage or a target? All eyes turned to Alistair. His expression remained impassive. She made her choice. She'll face the consequences. And if she tries to come back after she realizes the truth? Declan asked. Alistair's laugh was devoid of humor. She won't have that option. As the meeting broke up, Nelson came in with an envelope. This just arrived, sir, hand-delivered. Inside was a formal invitation to a Ridgeview Academy fundraising gala the following month, with a note in Samantha's handwriting. Alistair, I know things ended badly, but the students shouldn't suffer because of our personal situation. Please consider attending. Alistair showed it to the others. An opportunity. The gala will be our endgame. That's cutting it close, Declan cautioned. The divorce proceedings will be delayed through your legal maneuvering, Alistair said. I want everything to culminate at the gala. Poetic justice. That evening, Alistair returned to the estate for the first time since the anniversary. Ruby was gone. Samantha must have dismissed her. The place felt cavernous and empty. In the master bedroom, Samantha had taken clothes but left many belongings. In her studio, her paintings remained, including a portrait of Alistair from their 5th anniversary. In it, he looked younger, more vulnerable, a man still open to forgiveness. That man was gone. He went to his office and opened the safe. Inside was evidence he gathered years ago, never used. Proof that Samantha's rise to department head had involved questionable tactics against the previous head. He'd once kept it secret, believing she deserved success. Now it was ammunition. His phone rang. Leander Moreau's name on the display. Mr. Voss. Leander's smooth, practiced voice said. I think it's time we spoke man to man. I don't believe we have anything to discuss. I believe we do. About Samantha, about the divorce proceedings, about moving forward amicably. Amicably isn't how I describe an affair with my wife for 7 months. Leander sighed. The heart wants what it wants, Alistair. Samantha didn't plan for this, neither did I. And yet here we are. What exactly do you want, Mr. Moreau? I thought perhaps we could discuss an accelerated settlement. Something fair for all parties to avoid a drawn-out legal battle. By fair, you mean generous to Samantha, which effectively means generous to you. A pause. That's rather cynical. Is it? Let me be clear. You don't know me. You don't know what I'm capable of. But you will. Alistair ended the call, then left the house, activating a special security protocol on his phone to monitor the property. The pieces were almost in place. The storm gathered. Soon, it would break. A week later, an emergency board of trustees meeting at Ridgeview Academy addressed serious allegations against Leander Moreau. Alistair watched via secure video feed from Viola's hidden laptop. Headmaster Walton appeared shaken as he reviewed the documentation from Teresa and Adriana. Accounting irregularities, a pattern of predatory behavior, and previous departures under suspicious circumstances left the board with little choice. In light of these concerns, Walton concluded, the board has decided to place you on administrative leave pending investigation. This is absurd, Leander exclaimed. I've raised donations by 30%. Nevertheless, we must follow protocol. Please clear your office by the end of the day, Walton said, not meeting his friend's eyes. Jonas ended the feed. Phase 1 complete, he reported. He's suspended. Good, Alistair said. Now for Phase 2. Later that day, Alistair's attorney finalized the purchase of Leander's gambling debts. By evening, Leander would receive notice that the entire sum was due in 30 days. Samantha, meanwhile, found herself under professional scrutiny after anonymous tips about her questionable methods in securing her promotion. She faced no immediate termination, but her influence was curtailed. 3 days after Leander's suspension, Samantha called Alistair, voice trembling with anger. What have you done? He's suspended, his apartment was ransacked, and some loan shark is demanding payment of debts he swears he doesn't have. This has you written all over it. That's quite an accusation, Alistair said calmly. Any evidence to back it up? Alistair, please, whatever you're doing, stop. This isn't like you. You lost the right to tell me what I'm like when you chose to end our marriage at a public dinner, he answered. As for Leander's troubles, maybe you should ask him about Teresa Bowden and Adriana Kelly, or about where your department's art supplies have really been going, or about the security designs he stole from my office. Silence on the line, then barely audible. What are you talking about? Do your research, Samantha. I did mine. Alistair ended the call. He orchestrated what he now thought of as a symphony of revenge, culminating at the upcoming Ridgeview Gala. Candles, formal attire, donors, and the perfect setting for a dramatic reveal. He arranged for Teresa and Adriana to attend as his guests, arranged for Leander's debt collectors to appear, and prepared a presentation that would leave no doubt who had orchestrated this downfall. The night before, Alistair visited the house again. In Samantha's studio, he left a portfolio labeled "A for Samantha," open before the gala. On top was a handwritten note. You wanted freedom. Here's your chance to walk away before tomorrow night. This is your only warning. He departed, activating a security feature that would record Samantha's every move and word once she came. He wanted to witness her reaction when she realized how thoroughly he had dismantled her future. The morning of the gala, Jonas called with urgent news. We have a problem. Leander's caught on. He's trying to liquidate assets. He bought plane tickets to Buenos Aires. Flight leaves tomorrow morning. He's planning to run right after the gala, Alistair said, frowning. And Samantha. She found your portfolio. She made frantic calls. Her lawyer, then Leander. They had a screaming match. She left afterward. She still plans to attend the gala, telling Headmaster Walton she needs to set things right. Maintain surveillance, Alistair said. I want to know every move. Alistair then spent the day in final preparations. By late afternoon, everything was set. He arrived at the Roland Museum, hosting the Ridgeview Spring Gala, fashionably late. Headmaster Walton intercepted him at once. Alistair, thank you for coming, Walton said, offering champagne. I've arranged everything as we discussed. Excellent, Alistair said. Presentation slot is after dinner. Yes, right before donor announcements. Are you sure you don't want to present your gift then as well? I have something special planned, Alistair replied. Trust me, it'll be memorable. He spotted Samantha in the crowd, in animated conversation with a board member. She wore a midnight blue gown, hair elegantly pinned up. Even after everything, Alistair felt a pang, something akin to grief for what might have been. The pang passed when Leander appeared at her side, dark hair, perfectly styled. The tension between them was obvious in their minimal eye contact. When dinner ended, Walton introduced Alistair to speak. Alistair adjusted the microphone, scanning the room confidently. Thank you, Headmaster Walton. Ladies and gentlemen, supporters of Ridgeview, I stand before you at an unusual juncture, both personally and professionally. A hush fell. Samantha went pale. Many of you know that my wife, Samantha Voss, and I are separated. What you may not know is how that separation occurred, on what should have been our 10th anniversary. Murmurs rippled. Normally, I'd keep such matters private. However, when personal betrayal intersects with professional misconduct, silence is complicity. Alistair signaled, and the lights dimmed. A scream descended behind him. What I'm about to show you involves not just my marriage, but the integrity of Ridgeview Academy itself. Financial documents appeared, highlighting embezzlement in the art department, naming Leander Moreaux as the culprit, and implicating Samantha as complicit. Gasps filled the room. At her table, Samantha half rose from her chair, horrified. There was no sign of Leander. Alistair continued, revealing further details about Leander's past at other schools. The affairs, financial manipulations, sudden departures. Teresa and Adriana stood in the crowd, faces solemn. Then Alistair presented proof that Leander had stolen proprietary security concepts from Alistair's files. I present these facts, Alistair concluded, not out of vindictiveness, but because the students and faculty of Ridgeview deserve better than leaders who see this institution as a hunting ground. I trust the board will take appropriate action. At that moment, a commotion erupted at the back. Leander, trying to slip out, was stopped by two serious-looking men, representatives of the gambling debts now called due. "Mr. Moreau," one of them said loudly, "we need immediate payment on your outstanding loan. $200,000. The room buzzed with shock. Some board members rushed off to confer. Staff stared wide-eyed as security escorted Leander outside. Samantha stood alone, abandoned. Alistair descended from the stage, offering polite nods as stunned onlookers parted for him. Samantha grabbed his arm. "How could you?" she whispered through tears. "Everything we had was a lie. You ended it with a cake that read, 'Goodbye forever,'" Alistair said. "Consider this my response. I made a mistake, you say. Too late. I see it now," she begged, tears streaming. "We could still." "No, Samantha. We couldn't." He removed her hand gently. "You chose your path. Live with it." Headmaster Walton hurried after Alistair, who strode toward the exit. "I don't know what to say. This is unprecedented. Implement proper financial controls," Alistair said coldly. "As for my promised donation, I've decided to redirect it to student scholarships. My attorney will send the details." Outside in the cool air, Jonas joined him. "Quite a performance." "What now?" Alistair asked. "Moreau won't make his flight. His creditors will make sure of that." Samantha's future is no longer my concern," Alistair answered. "The divorce will proceed. She'll get exactly what the prenup allows. No more, no less." They walked to the waiting car. Alistair glanced back at the museum's lit windows, where chaos still reigned. His work was done. It didn't fill the void that opened the night he first overheard Samantha, but it served its purpose. The Alistair Voss who once valued loyalty was gone. In his place stood a man who would never be vulnerable again. 1 month later, Alistair sat in Declan Ames's office, signing the final divorce papers. Declan watched him initial every page without hesitation. "That concludes it," Declan said, stacking the documents. "Once filed, the marriage is over. Samantha receives what the prenup stipulates, basically what she brought in plus an annual stipend for each year, and she's agreed. She has no choice. After the Westlake, Ridgeview, embezzlement fiasco, she knows a legal fight would lead to criminal charges." Alistair nodded. "And Moreau's?" Declan smiled thinly. "Last we heard, he's working in Brighton Bay as a barista under a fake name. His creditors got everything he had. His teaching career is over. He's blacklisted." "And Samantha's career?" Alistair asked. "She resigned the day after the gala. No criminal charges, but she can't get hired at any reputable institution. Word spreads fast. Last I heard, she's teaching children's classes at a community center in Fernhaven." Alistair absorbed it all without expression. "Good. That closes this chapter." He left the firm, checking his phone to see missed calls from Nelson. When he returned them, Nelson explained a crisis at the Haverford project. Contractors threatening to walk unless the budget was raised. Alistair gave curt, unforgiving instructions. If they walk, they'd never work in the region again. Then he instructed Nelson to have a backup team ready within 24 hours. This new Alistair Voss, colder, more relentless, had blowed into his business. Voss security still grew, but employees now feared him rather than admired him. Former loyalty had given way to dread. Alistair didn't care. Results were all that mattered. That evening, he returned to the estate, redesigned top to bottom to remove Samantha's influence. The once warm interior was now sleek and impersonal, like a high-end hotel. As he poured a scotch, his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. "Alistair Voss," he answered. "Mr. Voss, this is Dr. Eleanor Gray from Waterview Medical Center. I'm calling about Ruby Foster. You're listed as her emergency contact." "I'm not family," he said, confused. "She's Samantha's cousin. She specifically requested we not contact Samantha," Dr. Gray explained. "She insisted we call you. She had a severe allergic reaction. She's stable but sedated." Alistair went to the hospital, finding Ruby pale and hooked to IVs. Her eyes fluttered open. "Alistair, you came. You put me down as your contact," he said, remaining at the foot of the bed. "Why?" Ruby shifted, voice trembling. "Because I need to tell you something. I was afraid before. After what happened to Samantha, I can't stay silent. That night, your anniversary, Samantha asked me to house sit, said you might stay in the city. But that was never true. She'd already packed a suitcase. She planned to leave you no matter what." Alistair felt an odd twist inside. Not only had Samantha planned to publicly announce divorce, but she'd also never intended to come home. "Why tell me this now?" Tears welled in Ruby's eyes. "Because what you did was terrible. But now I get it. Leander used me too, last year. He tested his manipulations on me before targeting Samantha. When I saw them together, he pretended not to know me." Alistair stared at her. "So you knew about their affair beforehand?" "I tried to warn her," Ruby said miserably. "She said I was just jealous. I should have told you. Maybe it would have changed something." "It wouldn't have changed anything," Alistair said, turning to leave. She made her choice. As he left, Alistair learned more shocking news from Jonas Pike on the phone. Leander Morose had been found dead in Brighton Bay, a suspected suicide. Even in death, Leander managed to betray Samantha one last time, leaving a note implicating her in more fraud than actually existed. The final domino had fallen. Alistair said nothing. Jonas tried to console him, but Alistair hung up. Driving home alone through rain-slick streets, he realized his revenge was complete, beyond even his original intent. He should have felt triumph. Instead, there was only silence. 3 months later, Voss Security was unstoppable, celebrated in business magazines for professional excellence, forged in personal tragedy. But the cost was high. Alistair worked 18-hour days. Employees feared him. He had no personal life. One autumn morning, he was reviewing acquisition proposals when Nelson came in. "Sir, there's a Ms. Adriana Kelly here. She says it's urgent." Alistair frowned. Adriana had already been compensated for her help exposing Leander. "Send her in." Adriana entered, looking troubled. She placed a USB drive on his desk. "I got this in the mail. No return address. The note said to give it to you personally." Alistair's brow furrowed. "Why not send it to my attorney?" "I looked at what's on it first," she said. "It's about Samantha. She didn't do what you think she did. The embezzlement at Ridgeview. Leander framed her more thoroughly than we realized. He forged her credentials to cover up his theft." Alistair stiffened. "Why bring this to me?" "Because this destroyed more than Leander. It destroyed a woman who was partly a victim. I'm delivering this. Do what you want." Adriana left. Alistair washed the door close, then plugged in the USB. The files were video confessions from Leander, recorded before his suicide, admitting he'd manipulated records to frame Samantha if things went wrong. Samantha had never authorized the school's financial irregularities. When the last video ended, Alistair sat staring at the screen. The perfect revenge he'd orchestrated had been built on flawed evidence. Samantha was guilty of betrayal in their marriage, but she hadn't been the embezzler he'd made her out to be. Instead of regret, Alistair felt an empty dissatisfaction. He prided himself on thoroughness, yet he'd never verified the authenticity of that incriminating data. He sent the material to Declan for verification, then canceled his remaining meetings. Hours later, he found himself back at Valencia, ordering a drink at the bar. The manager recognized him. "Mr. Voss, we haven't seen you in a while. Table for one." Alistair nodded. As he sipped a scotch, memories returned of that night, the overheard conversation, the humiliating cake, the moment he'd become this new version of himself. Before leaving, he asked the manager, "You worked here that night of my anniversary." "That cake, who ordered it?" The manager looked uncomfortable. "It was delivered earlier that day with instructions. We assumed Ms. Voss arranged it, but she seemed just as shocked when it was brought out." Alistair felt a dark unease. He drove aimlessly, turning over fresh questions in his mind. Finally, he called Jonas. "I need you to investigate the cake from Valencia that night." "Who paid for it? Who instructed the bakery?" "This was months ago," Jonas said, perplexed. "Just do it." Alistair snapped. Over the next week, Alistair juggled running Voss security with personally overseeing this new investigation. Bit by bit, Jonas discovered the cake had been ordered via prepaid card with a fake name. Meanwhile, Declan confirmed Leander's confessions were authentic. Samantha's complicity had been a carefully orchestrated sham. Then an envelope arrived, hand-delivered. Inside was a note on fine stationery. "The full story awaits. Greenhaven Park, North Entrance, 8 p.m. Come alone if you want to understand what really happened that night. CF." The initials meant nothing, but the promise of answers drew Alistair like a magnet. At precisely 8, he parked by the darkened park. Beneath a lamppost, a woman in her early 50s waited, elegantly dressed with silver-streaked hair. She smiled coolly. Alistair Voss at last. He remained standing. "You have me at a disadvantage." "Clarissa Faraday," she said. "Leander Moreau was my son." Alistair felt a surge of shock. Clarissa Faraday, mother of the man who had destroyed his marriage. A name Jonas's files had mentioned only briefly, allegedly estranged from Leander. "Please, sit," Clarissa said, indicating the bench. "What I have to say will take time." Alistair stood rigidly. "Why reveal yourself now?" "Because I needed to see how far you'd go." She spoke without accusation, only a grim curiosity. "I needed to understand the man who destroyed my son." "Your son destroyed himself," Alistair countered. "He was manipulative, a gambler, a liar." "Yes. Dominic, Leander, was deeply flawed, but he didn't choose your wife randomly. Nothing about what happened was random, Mr. Voss." Alistair finally sat, albeit at a distance. "Explain." Clarissa opened a leather portfolio, removing an old photo of Alistair standing beside a man he recognized. "My late husband, Gregory Faraday," she said. "You knew him as Greg Franklin at Tristar Securities, your first employer. You testified against him when you discovered he was stealing from the company." Memories of his early career flooded Alistair's mind. Greg had been a mentor who championed his ideas, until Alistair discovered the embezzlement. Alistair had reported him. Greg was convicted and died in prison. Gregory took the money because Tristar withdrew the profit-sharing arrangement he'd been promised on the security system he helped you develop, Clarissa said bitterly. He felt betrayed. Did that justify his theft? No. But after he went to prison and died, my son and daughter lost everything. This was revenge then, Alistair said tightly. Your son targeted my wife. With your help. Not at first, Clarissa admitted. Leander didn't know your connection to us until he mentioned Samantha's last name. But I recognized yours immediately. I followed your career, watched you prosper while we were shattered. Once I realized who you were, yes, I encouraged Leander. I suggested the anniversary divorce announcement. The goodbye forever cake was my personal touch. Poetic, don't you think? Alistair's stomach turned. You manipulated events to destroy me. Yes, but I never expected you'd retaliate so completely, Clarissa said. You didn't just divorce Samantha, you crushed them, and now my son is gone. He left me a suicide note apologizing for failing to finish what we started. But I wanted you to know the truth. Your perfect life was unraveled by design, not happenstance. Alistair spoke icily. You've just confessed to orchestrating fraud and encouraging your son's destructive behavior. You realize I can use this against you. She smiled thinly. Prove it. Your devices won't have recorded this conversation. I swept the area. Any legal action would require admitting how badly you were duped. Your empire's image would suffer. Besides, what's the point? Dominic is dead. Your marriage is over. Damage done. She rose, gathering her belongings. Samantha was collateral damage in a family war she never knew existed. She's guilty of betraying you, yes, but not of that embezzlement. You allowed false evidence to justify your vengeance. Now you get to live with that. With that, Clarissa Faraday disappeared into the night. Alistair remained on the bench, grappling with the scale of manipulation across decades and generations. Yet he felt only a cold clarity. His revenge had been triggered by partial truths, but it was complete. He'd survived, grown richer, even if it cost him the final shred of his former self. Weeks later, Jonas confirmed Clarissa's story in every detail. Gregory Faraday had once been Alistair's mentor, cheated out of profit-sharing, convicted for stealing. Dominic/Leander changed his surname, eventually crossing paths with Samantha. Their relationship had been real enough, but Clarissa had stoked it into a weapon to crush Alistair. 6 months after meeting Clarissa, Alistair sat in his new penthouse office, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Voss Security had just closed its best quarter ever. The business press dubbed him the Machine for both the company's precision and his own emotionless leadership. Nelson entered with the day's schedule. Sir, the board meeting is in 10. The reporter asked again for an interview about your personal journey since the divorce. Decline it. Alistair said curtly. Yes, sir. The legal team finalized the Meridian construction takeover. Their CEO requests a personal meeting to discuss key staff. Unnecessary. We'll keep the employees who meet our standards. The rest will be severed. Nelson hesitated at the word. Severed, so typical of Alistair now, then left. Moments later, he returned with an envelope. This was delivered this morning, sir. The handwriting looks like Ms. Voss's. Alistair stared at the envelope for a long moment. Samantha's handwriting had once been scattered around his life in sweet notes. Finally, he told Nelson to leave it. An hour passed before Alistair opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Alistair, I've learned the truth about Leander, about Clarissa, about the setup that destroyed us both. I don't expect forgiveness. I betrayed our marriage, regardless of whatever larger plan was at play. But I wanted you to know I found a kind of peace starting over. I hope someday you find the same. Goodbye, truly this time. Postscript. I'm back to teaching art to underprivileged kids, the work that brought us together originally. Some patterns are worth repeating. Alistair read it twice, then tore the letter into precise squares and dropped them into the shredder. He would offer no response, no acknowledgement. Samantha Voss, now Foster, legally was severed from him, as surely as if she'd never existed. That evening, driving his luxury sedan through the city, Alistair passed a small art gallery hosting a bright, cheerful opening. Through the windows, he glimpsed an entirely different world. People laughing, celebrating creativity and connection. For a flicker of a moment, something inside him stirred. A faint memory of the man he'd been before that catastrophic anniversary night. Then it was gone. Alistair Voss continued on into the darkness, alone by choice, severed from any possibility of forgiveness or the man he might once have been.